what the PBM business has done has set up something that is no less more than a gangster enterprise. Insulin in particular, since between 1997 and 2018, there has been almost a 2,000% increase in the cost of insulin. Nothing's changed. The drug hasn't changed one iota. There's no new R&D. It's the same drug. If you can't get mad about that, I think you're asleep at the wheel.
All right, what happens when one of America's most seasoned mass tort lawyers trades a courtroom for the page and exposes the pharmaceutical industry in a way only an insider can? Today on Cut to the Chase podcast, I'm joined by Mike Papantonio, living legend, trial attorney, legal commentator, and yes, book author of now, repeated book author as a matter of fact, but the latest being The Middleman. In this gripping new novel, Mike pulls back the curtain on the shadowy world of pharmacy benefit managers, corporate corruption, and the legal battles that mirror some of the most explosive mass tort cases of our time. If you've ever wondered what it takes to take down big pharma or what stories get hidden behind billion-dollar settlements, this episode will hit it home. Let's cut to the chase and dive right into the courtroom drama, both real and fictional, with the man who's fought these battles himself and won, Mike Papantonio. How are you doing, Mike?
Good, Greg. Thank you for that wonderful. That's just such a kind invitation. Thank you for that. You did say something that I just caught me as you were talking, and that is that a lot of people don't know these stories. You know, as you were talking about the idea of telling the story, unfortunately, they don't know the stories that are told about things like the pharmaceutical fights that go on constantly, or the tobacco fight, or the opioid fight. And so these books, they talk about issues that mainstream media is derelict in talking about. There's no way the average person out there can know these stories, especially PBMs, which is what the Middleman is about.
Yeah. So last night I actually went out to dinner with some of my very intelligent friends, and I told them a little bit about today's podcast, and I asked them if they knew what these PBMs they have never heard of it. And I was really
It's amazing. And these are people that you would expect to. That's what I've always found amazing too, since it's a $300 billion industry, and it's causing medicine cost across the board to be raised by 50%. So it's a pretty important story. Unfortunately, the problem is, Greg, is corporate media doesn't talk about it because of financial reasons. The pharmaceutical industry, if you turn on the television, there's an ad every 8 minutes selling some pharmaceutical. So they're totally unwilling to talk about this story. New York Times did really the first, what I thought was good coverage on this, and they called it The Middleman. And it was very well done, but that's so rare.
Yeah. Well, unfortunately, as you point out, the press has to make money, and so they take money for advertisements from the pharma industry. So they don't want to expose these kinds of stories, but people like yourself, become the real press and really educate people and inspire attorneys like myself and others to go after these big battles. And I appreciate that. And the public at large, really, I don't know if they fully appreciate all the good that you've done. But let's get into the show a little bit. And, I want to know what inspired you to turn your legal experience, especially in mass torts, into a legal thriller like The Middleman.
Yeah, I was at University of Florida. I was a news editing major, and I had always known that I was going to write. I thought I'd end up being a foreign correspondent. But the first time that it occurred to me that these stories are so poorly told by corporate media that it's basically owned by corporate America in every regard was the tobacco industry that our law firm initiated. We launched that case nationally, and it was amazing to me how difficult it was to get corporate media to talk about it. It was amazing to me how terrified regulators were to jump into the fight and do anything, how terrified congressmen and senators were to do anything. And so from the very beginning, the first book was Law and Disorder. I started talking about those issues, that there's no way that you can stay informed about issues that cost you not only your money but your life. And because you can't count on corporate media, you can't count on television or newspapers to tell these stories. So I started off with that, and I said, well, this is a good vehicle. There was pretty good success with that first book. And then after that, it was something to where there's a collection of 7 books, everything from opioids to human trafficking to the tobacco fights to pharmaceutical cases to Wall Street scams that steal money from mom and pop. And so those books made perfect sense to me, Greg, because it was so easy to do. I could come out of a courtroom at the end of the day and I could create a pretty good chapter about just what happened there, put some fiction aspect to it. And then all of a sudden you have people that are reading something and they're learning, and at the same time they're entertained. I mean, I think Middleman if you've seen the reviews on the Middleman, I think it's 4.9 on Amazon, and Kirkus just gave it a 5.50 rating. And I think what they liked about it, I think what people like about it is a page turner. It's not something where you get bogged down in legal talk, or you don't get bogged down in anything preachy. You simply read the facts. It's a good story, and you come away understanding everything you need to know about PBMs. And most people have no idea of how PBMs are affecting their lives.
Yeah, and it's pretty sad that that's the situation. And it's almost sad that I'm going to say this, but to some degree, I'm looking to TikTok to provide me news.
Yeah,
And,
yeah. Well, that is sad, but you know what? It's the truth. It is absolutely the truth.
Yeah.
You and I, we're around this every day. You and I, because of what we do, we're confronting big issues every day, and we have to dig in. We can't just we can't take the lead paragraph and think we understand everything that's going on. So these books try to do that. They try to dig in further, and Middleman, I think, does a pretty good job of it.
Yes. And I speak to some of my lawyer colleagues about the industry, and their reaction to me a lot of times is, well, that was in the past. No, none of these companies are doing bad things anymore. And I'm just like, have you heard of ultra processed food? But all right, that's another chapter. All right. So I want to ask you the PBM IR Pharma in this book. How closely, I mean, I love the fact fiction because I love facts. I love nonfiction, but sometimes nonfiction can be dry and you stop reading it halfway through, you feel like but the fact that when you bring in fiction, it compels you to read the whole story and to pay attention to the storyline. But in this particular, and I'm always kind of intrigued when I'm reading fact fiction, how close is it to fact? And, without getting too deep into how, is it real, or is it real?
Greg, it's not only real, it's I feel comfortable telling you that what the PBM business has done has set up something that is no less more than a gangster enterprise. If I were to take the RICO analysis, the criminal RICO analysis, and I were to plug in the parts of the story of what these pharmaceutical PBMs do, you would see that these are basically there is no difference between criminal conduct and what we're seeing here. The only difference, Greg, is we have a Department of Justice that's so incapable of going after white collar criminals. They do it by choice. They don't look like the kid on a street that's selling 3 ounces of marijuana who goes to jail possibly for 10 years. These are people that are dressed up in Armani suits. They roll up in a Bentley. They were Harvard educated, Yale educated. They don't look like criminals, so we treat them differently. If you take the characters in this book, the reason I use an Irish mobster is kind of the vehicle here. His name's Connor Devlin, is because it's an equivalent to what's happening in the PBM industry. If you take a look at what they're doing between kickbacks and vertical integration and just price gouging, you have an industry that, let me describe it this way. This is if you take the PBM and visualize it between what we have the manufacturer and the pharmacy, everything that goes to that pharmacy has to go through the PBM. Now think about this. The PBM determines how much money is going to be charged for insulin. Now, they have a choice. Let's say there are 5 manufacturers of insulin. They choose which insulin they're going to put through to the pharmacy that will actually be paid for by insurance, right? The point that everybody misses is they get kickbacks. They get kickbacks from the pharmaceutical manufacturer to do that. They call them rebates. They call them administrative fees. They're kickbacks. They say to the other 4, I'm sorry, you didn't pay enough money. These people paid us a lot of money, so we're going to let their medicine through. That goes on constantly. The other thing they do right now is this is really a threat to the American culture where it comes to delivery of medicine, is they now are building their own pharmacies. You see, not only do they set the price, they then move it on to their own pharmacies. And you know what? Government has known about this for a long time. Oddly enough, the very first person that's ever started talking about it is this administration. I mean, this has been going on for decades. Everybody knows it's extortion. It's pure extortion. If you don't do what we want you to do and allow us to set the price and then give us a kickback for whatever that price is, we're not going to allow your medicine to be paid for by insurance. The co-pays that are caused from these PBMs have been increased every single year since 1997. And I'm not talking about small increases. I'm talking about 10, 20% kind of increases since 1997. They control what medicine is paid for. They control what the price is, and they expect extortion payments in exchange for that. That's what this industry is. There's no other way to describe it.
It's pretty sad. And the reality, the nice thing about this book is it really, brings up the PBM industry in probably the most egregious way that at least I know of, which is the insulin pricing. We're not talking about certain, drugs that really, just make you look better, or maybe they make you lose weight a little, but these are like life-saving drugs. So there are people out there that just can't afford it. And there's a direct connection from what I read in this book between people dying and the PBMs. I mean,
it's not just insulin, though, Greg. If I were to name the drugs that are life-saving drugs that, but for their ability to be able to buy a person's ability to buy the drug, they would die. There are markups as high as 10,000%. 5,000 is almost the norm. 2,000 is the low exception. But so we're allowing an antitrust scheme that's nothing less than criminal. We're allowing price gouging. We're allowing mob quality conduct to take place with kickbacks, with vertical integration that is nothing more than changing the way that a person's able to get drugs across the board from the time it's manufactured to the time that they use the drug. Look, understand this. This is a drug that insulin costs $2 to manufacture. We sell it for $200 to the average person. In Australia, the same drug sells for $7. In Canada, it sells for $11. All across the world, those are the numbers. And, you wonder, why does it happen? It happens because we have a Department of Justice that's afraid to perp walk anybody. We've had presidential administrations that get so damn much money from the industry that they're afraid to pull the trigger on anything. We have regulators who today are working in regulation, and tomorrow they're going to work for these pharmacy drugs, for these pharmacy companies. It's a revolving door problem. So insulin in particular, since between 1997 and 2018, there has been almost a 2,000% increase in the cost of insulin. Nothing's changed. The drug hasn't changed one iota. There's no new R&D. They repackage it different, that looks different. It's the same drug.
And it's obviously, it doesn't have the patent protection at this point.
No, exactly. So, I mean, if you can't get mad about that, I think you're asleep at the wheel. We want to say it's far more. I would say right now, there are at least 24 drugs out there that save lives, but for the drugs, people will die. We have to count on the PBM to set the prices on those drugs, and knowing that the PBM is getting kickbacks from the people who make the drugs. And we just, kind of whistle through the graveyard like nothing's wrong here.
Yeah, I mean, I can't even believe, you would use the word kickback. I've represented several doctors in my practice over the years, and that's like the top of the line issue for them is not to do any. Yeah, so you refer patients out to specialists and all that, but you cannot accept a kickback. And so the fact that this is even in play to me is making me scratch my head, and I'm just kind of curious. Is there talk of getting rid of the PBMs, or
right now the only person talking about is Bobby Kennedy. You've got Trump and Bobby Kennedy talking about. Listen, here's where the rubber meets the road. This is this is an administration that's taking big steps. I mean, with the tariffs, with the deportation, you name it. These are all big steps. With getting rid of thousands of governmental employees, with the DOJ issue. These are complicating factors for an administration. So the best thing I think they understand they can do is to solve the medicine crisis in the United States. And if they were to do away with the PBMs, they're 90% successful in charging the overpricing. Greg, let me just tell you, one time I was taking a deposition, I think it was in Yaz, and I was in Amsterdam, and room full of lawyers, jam-packed, you know how those things go, right? So it was a bloodbath. This poor guy, it was total bloodbath for this guy. It went on for 8 hours. And so I was having fun there at the end, and I said, let me get this right. Over here, you're charging $1.50 for this drug. In the United States, we're charging $7. Why is that? You know what he said? Because we can get away with it.
We can.
Literally, because we can get away with it was his answer. And so for us to ignore a $300 billion revenue company that is spreading money around like a drunk sailor, knowing that they're in the fight for their lives, if Kennedy and if Trump and this administration do what they say maybe are going to do, God bless them, man. We changed the way medicine is administered in this country.
Okay. Well, listen, all's well that ends well. I hope I'm going to be saying that a few years from now. But I want to know, how closely does the Pharma, the main PBM in your story, reflect the real pharmaceutical giants that you actually have battled in? Is it?
Yeah, exact.
You put them on steroids, or
let me tell you where I got. Yeah, let me tell you, we've got PBM case going against the opioid industry. We've got PBM cases going against the insulin industry. If I look at the facts that I've laid out in Middleman, you can take the facts in Middleman and plant them right inside those two pieces of litigation that are taking place as we speak. And so they seem shameless about it. They seem absolutely shameless. I can't go into the details of the litigation that's going on, but if you read Middleman, you'll understand the litigation.
All right, going back to that, Connor Devlin, who you mentioned, one of the main characters, Irish mobster. I think one of the things that people don't realize, we all love The Sopranos. We can't get enough of it. The Godfather. Some people have watched The Godfather 100 times. They're rolling lines left and right, and they love it. They are just totally into it. I would read reports from the Sopranos stars where mobsters, gangsters would actually reach out to them and say,
I've read some of that, Greg. You're right.
That's crazy.
You're right.
But Connor, so what I kind of gleaned from the book is that Connor Devlin, the Irish mobsters, in their suits, Harvard graduates and all that. So is that the new?
Yes, it is.
Is that the new mob? Is that the new mob?
This is the new mob. Let me just put it this way. Connor Devlin was a creation of mine based on me taking depositions against the most awful CEOs that I've ever been across the table with. He's somebody that is, he's a sociopath. Okay, there's no other way to put it. He's a character that was raised by mobsters in Ireland, right? He came up through the ranks of the mob as a runner, but he didn't have a mother or father, so the gangsters raised him. They gave him a great education. He went to the best universities. He dresses impeccably. He's a 6 6'4", 6'3", very handsome, white-haired kind of CEO look about him. When he walks in a room, everybody says, "Well, this guy must be a successful CEO." Well, no, he's a gangster. Okay, he's a gangster. He doesn't talk like a gangster. He does not dress like a gangster, but he's doing the same thing that gangsters do. And so that's the middleman tells that story. It's a wake-up call, Greg. It's a wake-up call to people who think everything is okay, that things aren't like that anymore, that we don't have this kind of conduct coming out of corporate America. We do. In the 7 books that I've put out, talk about every iteration of that, everything from tobacco to PFAS to human trafficking to opioids, you name it. These books talk about it, they discuss it, and then they give you the backstory. At the same time, though, it's a great story. It's a page-turner story. This, I promise you, you read Middleman, it will be a page-turner. You won't want to put it down. You'll say, God, I got to find out what happened here. And so that's the kind of thriller you want, especially when you can add to it that you're telling an important story about the American culture.
Now, for those lawyers out there that are listening, and you've heard about this big lawyer conference in Vegas a couple times a year, Mass Tort, something, MTMP, Mass Tort Made Perfect. Mike has been putting this on for years. It's the most amazing conference. And aside from the fact that he's probably had some of the biggest victories and transformed some of the worst corporate greed, and like we're talking about, he actually, I mean, Mike, you start the conference off by trying to inspire us lawyers, to get away from our nice little cozy practice and go after some of these cases. So my question to you is, what message do you hope trial lawyers and young lawyers take away from Middleman about the power of litigation in shaping society? Is that possible? Is it real?
It's absolutely possible. I think the best example I can give you is that I wrote a book one time that was called, it's called Law and Addiction. But in there were 2 storylines. One of them had to do with PFAS. And it tells a story about how Rob Bilott, the lawyer that brought me that case initially to try, they made a movie about him. It's called Dark Waters. But it tells the story about how Rob, under impossible odds, put this case together. He's working for a defense firm, Greg. They're threatening to fire him because he came onto a case that was so important to him, okay? Now, he could have chosen to say, no, I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to pay any attention to that. I'm simply going to go over here to the defense firm and I'm going to make my $2,000 an hour billable time and move on. Or if it had been somebody in just a plaintiff's practice, no, I'm just going to handle the 1-800 car crash case and I'm going to ignore this. The truth is we all have the same license. Everybody has the same license. And to do mass torts is not difficult. It's not difficult at all. Right now, you've got the Depo-Provera case that's moving through, the NEC case. These are horrible cases, man. It's just a matter to get started. Go get the cases. Join up with some people who do this for a living and have done it all their career. Then you learn how to do it, and then the next thing you know, you're on your own doing it by yourself. But initially, it really comes down to doing a simple ad, maybe in the penny newspaper, half-page ad. Did you take Depo-Provera? Do you have brain cancer? Because those 2 are connected. And so you pick up those cases and then you make your move to somebody who has been doing this for a long time. There's about 15 of us out there, 15 firms that do this. And so that's how you learn this business. But I think they're legacy cases, Greg. You've heard me use that term. Every time I've seen you out in Vegas, I talk about this, is that when you're at the end of your career and you're sitting down and you're talking to your child and the child says, Dad, what did you do for a living? Well, if you can talk about the fact that you cleaned up an entire ecosystem by going after the bad guys, or like your cases where down in the Everglades stopped a lot of bad stuff from happening. Those are cases that I call legacy cases that you're able to share with your children, and it means something to you. And not only that, it's very, very profitable. I mean, you know what? I use the term, I tell all my lawyers, do well by doing good. And they do very well. And they do a lot of good.
All right, last question. Also, a topic near and dear to me is the whistleblower. You have a whistleblower in this book, and major whistleblower storyline in the book. In your real life work, how crucial have whistleblowers been in cracking mass tort cases? Is this a common feature?
40% of the time, 40% of the time, mass tort cases are driven by whistleblowers who say, damn it, I've had enough. I can't stand what's happening here. I've got to do something. 40% of the time. They leave the company. They're disgusted by the conduct of the company. They call us. They come in with boxes of material that says this is what's happening. 40% of the time.
Yeah.
It's probably higher than that, but that's been my experience.
Okay. And so I think that I've represented a couple of whistleblowers. I went after the Geo group. They were all up to no good private prison industry, and they were still a major player in the whole thing. But, I think that if you are a potential whistleblower, if you're working for a company, there's bad stuff going on, it's difficult to be a whistleblower. It can change your life really in negative ways. You might be kicked
Look
out.
at Boeing, huh?
Yeah.
I mean,
Well, I think my advice really is that if you are a whistleblower, before you blow the whistle, reach out to Mike Papantonio, attorneys like that, so you can game plan and know what you're going to get yourself into.
well, that's nice
Yeah,
of you to say. They can reach out to you too, just as easily.
that's right. Yeah.
But it's a great thing we do, Greg. What we do for a living is really important.
All right. So my last question here is, are you, I don't know how you have the time to do this. I'm not, I've gotten past the point of like trying to figure out between your guitar playing, putting on these conferences twice a year, all the big cases that you're handling. I send you cases, I'm in the water
You do.
contamination, forever
You do.
chemical stuff.
You do.
But let me ask you something, is there more books?
Greg, I have a book coming out the first of next year that if you don't love this book, I will be absolutely amazed. It's called The Death in Arcadia. And it's about actually you were out there when I talked about it out in Vegas. It's about, remember I had Paris Hilton out there one time, and Paris Hilton was in one of these institutions where she was raped and she was sexually abused four different times. Okay. Now, sexually abused. I don't know they all involved rape, but sexually abused 4 times. So with that, I said this is an industry we need to pay attention to. So Death in Arcadia is an exploration about what happens with reform schools in America. You hear parts of the story. You hear Philadelphia case where 2 judges were being paid $2,500 every time they sent a child to a reform school, regardless of whether or not it was a child that should be in a reform school. They'd send them there anyway. It's the abuse, the mishandling of these kids is beyond belief. And Death in Arcadia is, to me, really does tell that story real well. I think you'll really like that book.
Yeah, and I've actually had one of your associates, Caleb, talk about the troubled teen.
Yes,
On my
Caleb.
show, and Kimberly Adams is talking about, has come on the show and talk about sex trafficking. These things are going on right now under our nose.
Amazing.
Super Bowl happens, and all this nonsense is going on.
Yeah. Yeah.
People, this is an opportunity. You read this book, you're going to get a better insight, and it's a fun read. It took me 2 days to read it. Listen, when I've done, I would say 5 book authors on my podcast. And I know when I commit to it, I'm going to read the book. And I'm always like,
and we appreciate that, brother.
I'm like, dear God, I hope this is
a good book.
But it was, honest to God. All right. So that's going to do it for this episode of Cut to the Chase. Strand rated. All right, it's the summer coming up, folks. I know you're like, what books am I going to read?
Yeah.
The Strand rated this top 25 summer reads. So I'm in my show notes, Amazon, all the normal Barnes.
Yeah, Strand is a gold seal. I'll just put it like that. So.
All right. Well, listen, Mike, I don't want to take your time. You're a way busy guy. I appreciate you coming on. I would love to get you on to talk about the ultra processed food.
Let's do it, brother. Let's do it.
All right. So I'm going to reach out to your team.
Yeah, man. I hope to see you in Vegas. Right now I'm trying to get Jelly Roll. I'm going to interview him, either him or John Mayer. And it'll be a big program.
I'm a guitarist also. I know I've been in your office and I've seen you play whatever. If we get John there, I think
you'll come. Okay.
Well, no, I'm going to come no matter what, but I want to do
maybe play with him, huh?
Yeah.
Grab a guitar.
Yeah,
Yeah.
he's quite the guitarist. All right, Mike,
Yeah.
that's it. All right, folks, comment
Thanks a lot,
below,
brother.
subscribe, rate, share this episode because this is a major public interest topic that's affecting all of us and might affect you or your loved ones in a very bad way. So that's it, Mike. Go back to work. All right.
Thanks for the invitation, man.
That's all for this episode of Cut to the Chase. But before you go, will you open up your podcast app and give us a 5-star review? You can also leave a comment about what you liked most or other topics you'd like us to cover. And please be sure to subscribe so you don't miss any upcoming shows. Thanks, everybody. Be safe out there.